membership organization that works with cities and towns all over the country that either have or want to have fast, affordable, reliable broadband. And so the goal for us is to help people understand ordinances and policies that would help them at the local level, but also to advocate on behalf of local officials who are trying to solve problems at the local level and really help folks at the state and federal level understand the ways in which they can be helpful in getting the country built out. So we work with 184 cities and towns, and the 5 folks here represent 5 of those communities that we work with. I want to, before we get started, really thank Congresswoman Eshoo for hosting us today, and Kate Forsey, who is her Senior Tech Policy Advisor, for helping to coordinate. I also want to thank ISOC DC, the Internet Society of DC, and the Internet Society of New York for helping us with live streaming. I always appreciate your support. And also my colleague, Kat Blake, who's sitting here with us. Before we begin, I'd like to state publicly that Next Century Cities values diversity, diversity of opinion and diversity as it is more broadly defined. When organizing a panel, we strive to ensure diversity on multiple dimensions, and though it's not always possible, we want to acknowledge the importance and value of such diversity. So we have a really great panel here of very talented folks today, and I'm going to let each one of them introduce themselves and give you sort of a 3-minute overview of the current state of broadband within their communities and how they are managing broadband.
Very good. Well, my name is Wade Trox. I'm the mayor of the city of Fort Collins, Colorado. Fort Collins is a city of 170,000 residents, 190,000 if you consider our growth management area, and that's what we're going to be serving with our broadband utility. Our journey started about 5 years ago when basically when Google announced their Gig U, and that created some conversation within our community. And we brought it to I chair the Futures Committee of a subcommittee of our council. And our Futures Committee at that point invited our 2 incumbent providers of broadband and asked, what's the future of broadband within our community? And basically it was a null answer at that time. In fact, one just said that they're a content provider, they're not an infrastructure provider. And so that was startling at that point when we had that conversation, and that began our journey over the last 5 years to last November, and I will go into more details of some of the challenges that we faced along the way. One of which is in Colorado, there's a Senate Bill 152 that was passed in 2005, which was really protectionist by incumbents to even allow for cities and towns in Colorado to even have a conversation regarding broadband, even to the point of you couldn't provide even in your city hall a local area network where citizens can tap into the internet, and so it's really restrictive. And since it was passed in 2005, over 90 cities and towns within Colorado have taken it to the ballot to allow them to even have a conversation, and every one has passed. And so for me, I think this is just horrendous legislation that really creates barriers to even have conversation in our rural communities as well as our cities around having broadband access. Fort Collins is a community, a high-tech community. It's a university city with a research extensive university in Colorado State University. Has high-tech companies including Intel, Broadcom, NVIDIA, and many others. And so you can imagine the kind of community we have in terms of their expectations and their capabilities and their desires. And so I look forward to sharing more of the challenges that we've had. But where we are right now, in November, we took it to the ballot to basically create our 5th utility, which is a broadband utility, and we'll be building that out over the next 4 years, and look forward to sharing more.
Thank you.
My name is Greg Murphy. I'm from Minnesota, I'm a township supervisor in Minnesota, plus I'm also on a joint powers board of 27 entities of government. There's 10 cities and 17 townships involved in help funding a closed loop fiber optic program for getting fiber to the home and to the farms in that area. This whole project started years ago. It started out by being a county project. That one failed to the extent where we went back down and only grabbed onto the townships and the cities that were willing to be participants in this. And right now we're about half built up. We started with the cities. We have 10 cities, about 90% built. And the next stretch is going to be for the townships, where 17 of them are going to get fiber right to the home or to the farm on that project. So it's been interesting. Like I said, we've had quite a bit of involvement with our RS Fiber is the name of the fiber cooperative that we're dealing with, and it's Hiawatha Broadband is the service provider that's helping us build this system out. So we're on the funding side of it.
Thank you.
All right, I'm Jeremy Peetzold. I'm the City Council President in the City of Sandy, just east of Portland, about 20 miles at the base of Mount Hood. We're a small town of 11,000 residents now. And our story starts back in 2003, where the City of Sandy was try to get DSL at City Hall to get internet, and was told that they couldn't get DSL at City Hall. There was nothing but dial-up in our community, and they realized that we would dry up as a town if we couldn't, if there was no broadband internet. At that time, DSL was obviously common. With a town 12 miles away that could get cable access and DSL and that type of thing. So we started off by doing DSL ourselves, and then branched out to doing wireless, a WISP, you might hear the term, wireless ISP. And we grew that, became very popular with that, but there were some limitations with our density with doing a wireless ISP, and so we went ahead and started doing, made a plan to do fiber to the home. And so in our fiber to the home project, we did it a little differently. We worked backwards. We wanted to set a price that our residents, we knew they could afford, and so we knew that was no more than $40 a month. And so we figured out and made the math work. And so we ran fiber in front of their base house, prayed for 35% take rate, and we got right out of the gate a 60% take rate on that. Our lowest tier is 300 megs for $39.95 a month, and that's symmetrical, so up and down. And gig is our other tier, and that's $59.95 a month as well, symmetrical. And with no contracts or bandwidth caps, we take the approach that if we're not doing something right, if you don't like us, you can go somewhere else. Since we did put the system in, the incumbents that were there started offering DSL. That's still the only thing they offer is DSL. And the cable system, which was a one-way system before, meaning that they couldn't do internet on that, started offering internet as well, and lowering their price as and giving our residents options. We currently sit about 70, just a little bit more than 70% take rate in a matter of 3 years.
Thank you.
My name is Patrick Mulhern. I'm a public policy analyst for Santa Cruz County, California. We are the second smallest county in California by geography, around 250,000 people. We are a coastal community with dense development along the coast, and then protected green space in the interior of the county, so farmland, timber harvest parcels, but very little development. We do have rural residential areas, though, where there is some density in housing, but nevertheless, there's no fiber to these homes. Most of the houses there are served by legacy DSL systems or satellite. The irony of the situation is that we're 30 miles south of Silicon Valley, and around 30,000 people commute every day from Santa Cruz County to their tech jobs in Silicon Valley. When they come home, they have DSL or satellite or what have you. A lot of people would like to work from home, but because of the state of their internet service, they can't. wants to find ways to improve their internet service. We just don't have the density to make it attractive to the incumbents who continue to invest in our urban areas along the coast. So we have gigabit speeds for everyone along the coast, but in the interior where we have less population density, we don't provide these sorts of services for most people. 5 years ago, in order to rectify some of this, we met with our incumbent internet service providers to find what exactly were the reasons why they weren't investing in these rural areas where we knew we had savvy and hungry customers for the product. And they told us pretty much everything that we're hearing now, that local governments are impediments to the process, and our permitting processes are interfere with their development timelines, and so we modeled our policies on their concerns, and I'll speak about this a little bit later, but we tried to streamline our processes and make it cheaper to develop in Santa Cruz County.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Robert Wack. I'm from Westminster, Maryland, which is about an hour and a half from here. If you just go straight out Georgia Avenue and just keep driving, you end up in Westminster. My story, or our story in Westminster, is sort of a combination of all these other folks. Like Jeremy and Sandy, our local providers were unable or unwilling to upgrade the services that our residents wanted, particularly the business community. Like the folks in Santa Cruz, about 2/3 of our community leaves Carroll County, Westminster, every morning. They come here, where they go to Baltimore, they go to Northern Virginia. So we're very much a bedroom community, but we were a rural community, so we're sort of transitioning from something in before that, this was all farms, and now it's sprawling suburbs, and it all centers around Westminster. So if we want to do anything to change the fact that 2/3 of the community gets up and leaves every morning and sits in a car, we needed to change what's available in terms of infrastructure and broadband services. And as I said, the incumbents were unwilling to do anything different, so we struck out on our own, and like Sandy, we started building our own system, but we took a different approach in terms of the business model. So in Westminster, we use a public-private partnership where the city of Westminster builds, owns, and maintains just the fiber and the conduit and the little boxes that all the stuff sits in. But then our partner installs the lit equipment and provides the services. And our partner is a company called Ting. They're based out of Toronto in Canada. They're an ISP. They started off in domain name registration. The parent company is 2 Cows. And then they got into mobile service, and then now they do fiber ISP services. Our project started the planning for it started in 2012. We put out RFPs in 2014, started construction in 2015. We did a pilot project first, showed that it was viable and that people wanted it. Then we moved into the rest of the construction. Took down a $21 million general obligation bond to fund the whole project. And today we're more than halfway finished with our construction, and we're hitting all our numbers in terms of subscriber take rate and financial performance, covering our debt service, and minimizing the subsidy from our general funds to the newly created fiber funds. So like the other jurisdictions, it's not a full-blown independent utility. In Maryland, you can have enterprise funds anyway, it's inside baseball. But we're operating it as if it's an enterprise fund, like our water and sewer system. And it's a big success, and we're very happy with the service that Ting is providing, and we're signing up customers as fast as they can install them. So it's just a different example of how a local government can accomplish this.
Right, we have a variety of interesting projects all across the table that are unique. that are locally grown to solve a local problem, knowing the local resources and assets and complications you might have in each of those communities. I do want to follow up with Patrick, and anybody else is welcome to jump in as well. Patrick, you talked about this, that you've heard from industry that local communities are the barriers, and I hear that occasionally as well. And I'd love to have you respond to that. Specifically, can you tell us what the policies and ordinances are that you've put in place, and whether or not that has impacted investment in your rural communities?
Absolutely, thank you. So 5 years ago, we started a raft of policies. Like I said, we spoke with our internet service providers to find out how specifically are we impeding their development of infrastructure. We began with the Dig Once policy, the first one in the state of California. Our policy included some technical specifications for the types of conduit to be installed in our rights of way. We created a master lease agreement so that any incumbent ISP that wants to come into town to use county facilities to house their infrastructure can sign one lease with the county and use any of our radio masts or buildings or what have you to put their infrastructure on. We also created a broadband master plan where we identified areas in the county that were bereft of broadband and where we had high concentrations. We mapped that fiber and the conduit in the county so we know where there's fiber, we know where there's conduit. We also changed the permitting process for developing small cells, micro cells, and fiber projects. We created a definition for small cells, so that's your 5G technology. It's in our county code now. All of those permits were changed from discretionary permits, which involve public input, a lot of time, and a lot of money, to administrative permits where if the incumbents meet certain criteria, they're issued a permit for their facilities to slow down, to speed up the process and also make it cheaper for them. We also made sure that the fees that we were charging for our permits matched the actual cost. So we did a study to find out how much staff time and paper or what have you, the actual cost of the permitting process was, and then we made our permit cost that much. Had no effect at all on fiber deployment in the county, zero.
I'd like to add to what you guys did there, what we did in Sandy. So several years ago, we've all heard about Google Fiber when Google went in, and we then heard what the criteria were why Kansas City got picked to do the fiber to the home project. And one of the things I had the luxury of sitting and eating dinner with Mila Medine, who was the fiber guy for Google, and he said it was, we picked them and we're looking for cities that could tell us yes or no, not wait 45 days to give us a yes or no. Time is money, and time is money for private companies as it is for public, but be able to speed that up. And so, and obviously Kansas City had gone through that process and dedicated some people to their project to do that. But I took that back, not only in our own for telecommunications, but across our whole city. So whether it's building permits for a building or building permits or sign code or these type of things. So something that came out of the tech thing that I learned about, brought it back and revolutionized and changed what we're doing at the city to be able to break down those barriers that might have been there and change a culture that might have been perceived or not, whether it was true or not, to make those things happen quicker.
That actually, we had the same effect in Santa Cruz County that inspired a wholesale change of how we do permitting and planning in Santa Cruz County. So the same sort of ethic has now infiltrated this. I think that it's common for planning departments at local government to be black holes, and that's a cultural thing. So this has definitely radically changed the culture in our planning department, and now we're building permits as easy to get, and that's the new directive from all of the agency directors is we need to move this faster and implement more of a customer service model, which I think really that's the new way of governing. Public administration has moved to a customer service model from what it was in the past. So I think this has just sped up the process.
I just add, the improving business processes within the municipality. Fort Collins has one of our 7 outcomes areas for our community, for the city council, what we fund. is high-performing government, and we truly mean that. We were selected for Malcolm Baldrige Award in 2017. We're only the third city since the inception of the Malcolm Baldrige Award that municipality was selected, and that really speaks to the process. And so when we talk about permitting and other sorts of things, you know, we take a strong view of serving the customer, and so when it came to us with regards to broadband, our brand is so much better for our 4 utilities, and our citizens rely upon our 4 utilities, and it's so much stronger than the incumbents that we're building upon our brand within our community, and that's one of the reasons that we'll provide better services in addition to having much superior infrastructure as well.
Thank you. So what are the barriers that you as elected officials in your communities, what are the barriers that you and other municipalities face when you attempt to find broadband solutions? And what do you see as the biggest hindrance to broadband expansion in your community, but also in other communities? Whomever.
Basically, in the rural areas where I'm at, it's the cost of just putting it in is the biggest thing. We don't, I mean, the other day I got a phone call from Frontier Communications, who does our local phone service, and they wanted to just know what the frontage availability was to be able to put the lines in. I told them it's 33 feet from the center of the road. No permit, just get it in, go from there. So we don't, there's no barriers that we're having in front of anybody to do anything in our townships and even in our cities, which are a little different than the cities, but in our townships for sure. So, but for me, it's, we're not holding anybody back. We just don't have anybody knocking on our door. Mm-hmm. And it would be nice to have somebody who takes some interest in offering us some services.
I've seen 3 general, very broad, high-level categories of problems that hold back municipalities generally. It doesn't have anything to do with rights of way or permitting. There are even bigger problems with finances. You know, many municipalities and county governments across the country that face various unfunded mandates with or underfunded liabilities like pensions, healthcare costs, fire and EMS, infrastructure, roads, bridges, basic water systems, basic things that for a variety of reasons in different jurisdictions have been neglected or aren't funded adequately. So there's that. So everybody has these. And so those are today problems that require massive investments. So that and then another piece of it is political will. You know, just being able to summon the local will to see it through, and because these are hard. They're hard, they're expensive, they take many years, and I think a common thing you'll see in some communities is continuity with elected officials. So I've been in my position for 15 years. I think, Jeremy, you've been in yours almost as long.
12 years.
12, yeah. So it takes that sort of consistency to see the project through its ups and downs and its twists and turns, and you know, it's hard. Mm-hmm. So.
And we face municipalities and county governments face, under federalism, we face certain structural constraints on our authority. So you have things like Dillon's rule, which is case law that circumscribes the appropriate authority of municipalities. And then you have home rule, which are a raft of laws made by the states to further circumscribe what the appropriate role of municipal governments are. And so we don't have a lot of latitude as policymakers to make policy. We're in almost every sense subject states to the states and federal government. And further, in California, in 2006, they enacted DIVCA, which is the Digital Infrastructure and Video Competition Act, which took franchising rights away from local governments and enshrined them with the state. And so we lack even negotiating authority with service providers anymore. They don't have to talk to us about their fee structures or where their infrastructure is going to go. And I think that we don't have a voice in the policy making. And so we frequently aren't consulted when these policies are being made.
I think one of the barriers that comes up in rural areas is just we're just not that dense of a population base, and so when technologies come out faster, and they go towards the big cities, and so like that's how we started. We went to the incumbents, and we couldn't get DSL. We begged them, come on, let's do this. What can we do to help you? Just we were just so small on the radar that they wouldn't come and do it, so we ended up having to do it ourselves. And then you got other communities that are just so rural that it doesn't make financial sense for a for-profit Wall Street type company to drag fiber down the road or some other type of technology down the road 5 miles to get to the one house. And so what happens is it just never gets built because there isn't that structure. So I think that's a huge issue in a lot of rural America, and not even just rural, smaller cities as well. So.
That profitability, though, I mean, if internet service providers were to provide service to a home, they are guaranteed a customer for as long as they're in that market. So it's the horizon of the profitability that's the problem. They want the return on investment to be within 18 months or 12 months or whatever. But if the profitability, that if they reach the black level in 5 years, that's too long term for them. And so even though they would eventually be profitable in these less dense areas, they're not going to be profitable in a short enough span of time.
So I think the only state represented here that has a state law is Colorado, and you explained the difficulty of that. Each of you has had a unique pathway. Have you had any concerns in terms of your interactions with incumbent providers? Have there been issues that have come up that you felt like a collaboration would have been more effective?
Well, I'll start off. So our journey has been the last 5 years, and five years ago we met with the incumbents, and we wanted to jointly talk about our future and our community. And again, the answer was either no answer or that there more content. And so we engaged our community in an active conversation, all different sorts of ways, online surveys and things like that. And in 2015, we took it to the voters to basically get out of the 152 clause, so we could even engage with further discussion and pursue broadband if it was the will of the voters, and it passed by 82%. And with that, we went into a 2-year discussion and actually built it in. We had a $300,000 budget item that would actually engage in a broad way and actually go out for RFIs and RFPs to actually look at a full spectrum of options. We visited many other communities. Those have been successful, those that hadn't been. We engaged an expert panel as well as citizen groups within our community. And really out of that budget offer, we put together a business plan and went to the voters a second time in 2017, so last November. And that was to basically enable us to move forward with a charter change and to pursue municipal broadband or a public-private partnership if one emerged. And so we actively, through these RFPs, looked to partner with the private sector, and basically they wanted us to take the risk while they took the reward. And so there wasn't true risk sharing was what we were looking for. And so subsequently we've proceeded with a business plan that will be pursuing municipal broadband that will be built out over the next 4 years. It will be serving our urban growth area, fiber to the premises. And the next year, right now, we're hiring key individuals that will lead the competitive municipal broadband. And we have our hurdle rate is 29%, but we're targeting 50%, and we feel we have a strong support of our community for many reasons that the incumbents aren't serving our community. And with that, we've had to, and I should just mention the vote that took place last November. There was a citizens committee, and I should point out, Colorado is where a lot of the cable industry began, with Magnus and Jones and others. So cable industry has a strong foundation within the state of Colorado, and so when we went to the voters, we had a citizen committee, which there's cable labs in northern Colorado and so forth. So there's a lot of industry that supports it. In fact, we have a lot of knowledgeable people in Fort Collins that joined the citizens committee that actually promoted the broadband utility. And in the community, there's about $15,000 spent by the community in support of the broadband, and the incumbents, to defeat the measure, spent close to $1 million. So close to 75 times they spent. And it was really a disinformation campaign, because they were saying this would take away from our basic city services, and that was nothing. Wouldn't be the case at all. And this would be a separate enterprise. It would be in partnership with our light and power utility. We're a 99% undergrounded electric utility. So that presents a challenge for any incumbent, because they would have that high bar to basically underground within our community. And so I feel without any qualification that we would never be served with our incumbents because of that kind of investment. But we can do that as a municipality, because the payback will be over 25 years. And that's I think that's what really makes it a municipal broadband utility.
Right. And just as moderator, I'll mention that there are actually 20 states that have laws similar or more restrictive than Colorado in terms of local decision-making around broadband infrastructure, right? So after I ask this question, I'll check for questions in the audience, so you might want to be thinking about what you might ask. But can I ask now, you've each started a pathway. Some of you have completed your builds, and some of you are working with cooperatives or still haven't solved your rural issues in some cases. What, in the areas where you have built and with the successes that you've had, what are some of the outcomes you've attained because you've brought broadband to your residents? How have your efforts to help bring digital equity to your communities impacted your communities?
One of the things I can mention on that is in the town of Gaylord, Minnesota, they have, since they knew the broadband was coming to the community, there is a medical school that is now going to be taking over one of the school buildings that has been vacated because they built a new school in the area. And they're planning on bringing in, I think it was 600 students to this facility, or 300 students, I guess it was, 600 students. And also to provide housing for about 300 of them, at the same time about another 100 in staff. Well, for a town of 23 to 2,500 people, that's a pretty good hit. And if it's just because of the internet service, that means it was worth it for that community. So that's one of the things that we're really seeing as far as infrastructure help. In the rural areas, getting back to what you were talking about before, we are involved in a cooperative. So it isn't our system. It's not a municipality that we've created. We had some really good people working on some really creative ideas. And we actually, they're actually splitting our project into 2 phases. The first phase is to build 10 cities out. Once the cities are built out, the infrastructure is there, then they can develop into the rural areas on the second phase. It has yet to be voted on, but yet we did vote to be part of the footprint. So that's all part of the game. So what the Joint Powers has done is to help fund that program. So the 10 cities has set up a GO bond, and it was an $8 million, $8.2 million, I think it was, bond to help fund the project, which is a $15 million project. So about half of it was funded through the GO bond that we voted on. The next set is going to be probably worth, the next phase is like a 49 million, I believe, project layout. And that's going to be, have to be voted on, but it should come in about 2018, end of 18 or the middle of 19, I believe, so that next phase is going to begin. So we're cooperative, but RS Fiber is the name of the cooperative.
Right, and I think one of the interesting things about RS Fiber is it's 27 different municipal groups, right? I mean, all of these folks have worked together and agreed to move forward on this project.
Yeah, they came together. Originally, there was probably more like 35, but we needed to figure out what our footprint was going to be. So there was a point in time where we said, okay, who's in, who's not in? Because now we need to figure out what the cost is going to be. Can't figure out what the cost is going to be until you know how many people and how big of an area you're trying to serve. Once we got that down to the 27 entities, now we got together as a joint power to come up with a plan. Do we really want to help fund a private company, like a cooperative? And overwhelmingly, yes, they wanted to do this. There was nobody knocking on our door to give us service out in the country, not in our area. And literally, I'm like 45 minutes away from where the Super Bowl just took place. So we're pretty close. And nobody wants to cross that line. So that was a huge help to get 27 entities of government in 4 different counties to come together as one joint power to be able to provide funding to help a cooperative get off the ground.
Thank you.
In Westminster, we decided very consciously not to take a "if you build it, they will come" approach to the economic development benefits of our fiber project. So in addition to building the fiber and having this public-private partnership, we've also moved forward with establishing a 501c3 nonprofit focused on economic development around our fiber project. And that's called the Mid-Atlantic Gigabit Innovation Collaboratory, or MAGIC. And MAGIC's been up and running now for about 2 years, and we do regular tech entrepreneur cultivation and incubation with small startups, but that's actually the smallest part of what we do. The other 2 big pieces are what we call tech experiences, which are essentially workforce development programs for high school and college kids to get them interested in technology, build a local tech ecosystem, and place high school and college kids into jobs and internships. And our flagship program there is our Capture the Flag Cybersecurity Competition, which we've run now 4 times, started planning our 5th in April, and that's been a huge success. The other area that we focus on are what we call innovation labs, and these are projects that either demonstrate or develop technologies in our community that particularly utilize the fiber network. So we have 2 big projects in that area. One is our medical smart home project, where we have 2 homes that are connected to the fiber network that are administered by a local nonprofit that provides residential services for adults with intellectual disabilities. And we are incrementally putting different kinds of sensors and software in the homes to not just turn the lights on and see who's at the front door, like the typical sort of conventional smart home stuff, but really using the data collection methodologies that happen inside a hospital, like particularly in an intensive care unit. Lots of data is collected, it's analyzed, and it makes real-time observations and predictions and recommendations about health outcomes. So we're taking that same principle and moving it out into the home, and made some really cool progress on that. And then our other innovation lab project is our Main Street Augmented Reality project, where we are rebuilding an old church that used to be on Main Street and creating an augmented reality app so that you can stand. So what's there now is the library. So you can stand in front of the library and hold up your smartphone or your tablet and see the church that used to be there. And our plan is to move down Main Street and do a bunch of these kinds of things, to include our Civil War history and recreating things that will drive tourism, but would not be possible without the gigabit capabilities of our fiber network and the wireless network that we're soon going to have on Main Street. So we're trying to drive it a little harder than just building the fiber.
We had a little bit different outlook on the when we built the fiber out there. We were a bedroom community of Portland, and we knew we weren't going to be enticing, the Intels of the world out, or the data centers out to like Google and stuff into our little bedroom community. And so I think we had, I think sometimes people think, like Robert was saying, we didn't take the mentality of you build it, they'll come type of thing. It was more about the quality of life. And so what does the quality of life mean for our residents that are there? Because that was the most important thing for us. And so that also transitions to where they work, where they can drive to or not have to commute to. We have some examples of people who, if they had a certain amount of bandwidth, which seemed an unridiculous amount of bandwidth, they needed to be able to telecommute into Portland, but we were able to provide that so they don't have to drive, 20, 30 miles into Portland and back every day of the week. One of the things that a benefit we did as well, or saw, is we charge the same price for our business customers as we do our home. And if you remember, I was saying 300 megs for $39.95 up and down, and gig for $59.95. That's what we charge our businesses as well, because we realize that it doesn't cost us any more money. I know this as an engineer for 17 years, any more money to offer a business internet than it did a home user. Actually, home users use more in the big perspective of it. But that allowed it to not be a barrier to them as well of having the pricing there. So we got more rentals of downtown space, because before they didn't have any options to get internet there, or if they could get T1s or other things like that, it was going to be cost prohibitive. Another thing is our housing market is going crazy, but that's the whole Portland area is going crazy too. But what we've seen online is people actually taking pictures of their fiber modem in their house. As you slide through and go, oh, there's the kitchen, there's the front of the house, there's the fiber modem. What's that? To show that it's fiber ready, because it is. Instead of having to get in line to if the house didn't already have fiber on it. So those benefits, the real estate market is really appreciating that. The building aspect as well. So we get builders that come, and we ended up putting in code into our development code, saying that the developers had to put conduit in the ground, kind of like this dig once type thing, but this was dedicated for the fiber. Developers have never once complained about it, because they realize, well, we had one guy who said, I don't know about that, and his lawyer kind of hit him on the side and said, no, you want this, because it sells their fiber. And so they come back when we know that it sells their houses that they're building. And so we see that is a benefit too of that. Remember what I said, we couldn't even get DSL? Imagine what our town would have looked like. We've grown from about 6,000 to 11,000 in those courses of time. And if we had no internet, we would not have done what we've done. So.
I was going to ask one other follow-up to that, and that's, you did some interesting things around transportation.
Yes, thank you. That's another one. So you guys might know more than I do about some of the federal regulations with ODOT. ODOT is Oregon Department of Transportation. That's what we call ODOT. And when you get federal monies for transportation, there are some rules set aside saying that it can only be used for transportation. It couldn't be used for anything else. And so there's a lot of fiber sitting there that no one can use. But some rules changed a while back. But the people in Portland that run the Department of Transportation there for the state don't really realize that the rules may have changed a little bit. And so all our lights in town, we have Highway 26 that goes from Portland to Mount Hood, if you know Oregon at all. It has to go right through our town, but none of the lights were timed or synced. And so what would happen on a weekend, when people are coming through town, they just line up for miles outside our town because the lights would, be on the sequence that couldn't change or break down. Someone would have to drive from Portland all the way out to Sandy to change a light, drive back to see how it fixed it, drive all the way back out if there's another problem. That's after we called them and let them know that this was the case. And so we were asking them, hey, we'd like to trade fiber with you. You guys can have some fiber, and we'd like to trade fiber. It's commonly done all over there. It's both beneficial, and they just said, no, we can't do that. We can't do that. The federal regulations won't allow that. And So at the end of it, we said, you know what? We just want to give it to you. So here it is. Please make our town better.
You know, I'd just like to build on the business aspect of having fiber. You know, the whole premise of fiber in Fort Collins is related to our economic future and being a connected community and future-proofing our community. And we actively talk about our city as a platform for innovation. And so that clearly is related to the digital economy in all different sorts of ways, infrastructure and other kinds of things that really keeps our community on the cutting edge. And I'd just like to share a couple of anecdotes. So about 3 summers ago, went to our local hardware store that has a nursery as well. And it was that prime weekend where it was after the freeze period, so, and all the bedding plants are out, and so it's the 2 or 3 weekends, and the business internet from one of the incumbents was down. And that day they were only doing cash business. And if you can imagine how it crippled that business on that critical day, you know, not having reliable broadband. And that story has stuck with me. And I experienced that because I had to dig deep in my pocket for cash on that day. Because they couldn't do credit card transactions. Another example that I have in a redeveloping portion of our community, lower income, actually very vibrant at the moment, but it hasn't been served by the incumbents, and so it has limited speed in that particular area. A small business in that area was asking for 1 gigabit service, and the cost was estimated at $14,000, and that was just to get connected, and without any of the monthly service cost with it. Now we'll be offering in much the same way gigabit service to the premise at $70 per month, and that over the period is the payback for our hurdle rate of 29%, where we're expecting 50%. And some of the benefits that have accrued to our residents already, and we're just at the point now of designing and haven't begun to roll out. But the incumbents are dropping their prices radically. They're offering no service contracts, and so right now our citizens are benefiting from us just having the conversation and engaging in our community in this way. But you know, they're hungry for fiber, and our incumbents aren't going to provide it.
Same thing happened. Our incumbents have lowered their prices and have got away with contracts, and you know, it becomes a win-win for our citizens.
That's right.
I have an anecdote similar to Wade's about the cost of not doing this. In the ramp up to our project, we did a number of surveys of the community, feasibility studies, business model creation, et cetera. So one of the anecdotes that came out of the survey of our business community, which was overwhelmingly for this, they demanded it. Once they found it was possible, they were meeting out doors. This one business does graphic design and printing, and they work with large design costs. So they had a client out in the Midwest, and they were on a tight deadline. They needed to send a 3 gigabit graphics file out to Chicago and have the client approve it so that then they could get the print job ordered and get it all moving. So they're trying, and they had the premium class business service that was the best available in our community at the time. So they kept trying to send this 3 gig file over their fast connection, and it kept timing out because it was taking so long. The connection would drop, and they'd have to start over again. And after several hours of doing this, as the deadline was approaching, they just said, screw it. They put it on a thumb drive and FedExed it out, overnight FedExed it out to Chicago in the 21st century. You know, so that's the kind of pain that our businesses were experiencing, and how the lack of good broadband was suffocating their business, that was holding them back. So had, like these other guys, had we not done this, like Jeremy's building boom, these businesses would either continue to struggle or fail because they didn't have this, and now they do.
So are there any questions in the room that folks would like to ask?
Since I've got the mic,
So we can catch it on the live stream.
Yeah, well, you say, I will ask a
Okay,
question or two.
and then we'll send it over to you.
Okay, which is, backhaul, how do you deal with backhaul once you've got, you need, you're going to give anybody who's it, you know, backhaul, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I can answer that. You know, we're out of Portland about 20 miles, and so we leased fiber from a incumbent, just transport back to Portland. You know, where we could buy internet cheaply at internet hotel in Portland, where a lot of providers are at the same building, and so we can get that cheaper there. And then a few years ago, during the BTOP projects, our county, and I worked with our county to help get fiber all the way to the top of Mount Hood, all the way across our county to tons of schools and municipal buildings and government agencies, and to every city in our county. And so that allowed us to then have a dark fiber ring all the way back into Portland.
And then, are you offering triple play, or are you, you know, are you just pure internet and you leave that to the other players?
Go ahead. I just spoke.
Ours is probably a good example of how this is evolving very quickly. When we first negotiated our contract, we required our partner to provide a triple play because that's what everybody wants. And that contract, we finalized that in early 15, right? So just in not even 3 years, 2.5 years, the video business streaming has changed so much that they're still exploring, you know, building a head end and providing a traditional video product. That business is so expensive, and the way that they have to pay for content is so crazy. And in parallel, the streaming world is becoming so diverse, and there are so many options now that it's possible that we may forgive that piece of the contract and say, yeah, just kidding about the triple play, you know, that because the customers who are signing up now can have so many options with Sling, Roku, Hulu, Netflix. Now AT&T has this DirecTV package, which I'm told by people in our community who are doing it is a really good deal. They get 90% of the channels at a third of the price, and they stream it all. So it's possible that the triple play will go away. You know, I think it's a dying business model, and it's only surviving because the incumbents keep it alive.
Do you foresee income from the over-the-top players?
So our business model, we don't care who makes what off of how. We have basically what we call a real estate model. Our partner pays us a base rent based on basically the square footage.
You're not the ISP.
I am not the ISP. I'm a landlord. And the ISP.
Who is the ISP?
We're an ISP, so I can answer that question.
What part of a cooperative that is?
So we started 15 years ago or so in 2003, and we did not want to get into anything but internet. That's it. And that's all we did until we did the fiber project. When we did that, we were being told by every industry, everybody saying, you can't make it in the fiber business unless you're triple play. And we're like, we don't want to head in, because a head in, you know, was $1 million. And then in the course of looking at this for a year, it went down to being about $400,000. That's telling you how much the price had dropped. And that was having someone else provide it. What we ended up doing was contracting with a private firm that sells, that we connect with. We don't do the internet, or we don't do the TV. They are allowed to sell to any customer that we have, and they just let us know that John Doe at this address has it, and we turn on the port that's connected to the VLAN to allow them to buy TV service from a company called Yondu, which...
It's basically user-centric, but the user can choose who's the buyer.
Well, that's the only provider that's there. We put in a connection there. Hindsight, our customers, we trained them well in just using the internet to watch their media. Didn't want that, and so actually we probably only have maybe 30 customers that actually subscribe to that. And one reason being, I think, is because the price is the traditional style of what you normally see on cable or or a satellite where you have to buy these packages with 1,000 TV channels, but you're only going to watch 6. And so they go to the Sling and Netflix and all these other type of things, because you now can just watch TV straight over the internet. So I'm glad we didn't go into a head-in, and if I could go back, I would say we wouldn't do it. We did do telephone, because there's a lot of people that are saying, hey, I still need my telephone, especially an older generation. And so we don't advertise for what we have, and so we do offer that if people want it. But
So we
I could
have
ask a whole bunch more questions.
Yeah.
We have another question here, and then I'd like to ask a final one. So let's try and respond quickly, because we don't have lots of time. But thank you so much for asking.
Mr. Wack, you mentioned that the network is bolstering the opportunity to use IoT technology for the medical field now. Are any of your municipalities considering other smart city technology or other IoT technology, maybe through the private sector or something? And can you talk about the role of your network in that technology?
Thank you.
Sure. We just have a bunch of techie geeks that like to play with things, but as the staff members. But actually looking at doing Internet of Things type security, home security stuff for residents, because that's becoming a popular trend with other incumbents as well, and being able to do that. We haven't rolled that out. We help educate our residents and people for type of Internet things to make their lives even more enriched in medicine as well. One of the things what we've done as well, we're a wireless ISP as well. We've hooked up our water meters in the streets. We're converting those over to be automated, so that we don't have to go around and have a meter reader going to everyone, and so that's a slow process, because you just can't change that meter out quickly across the town. So that's a process that's going on, but we are doing some of those things. Some things we're thinking about and looking at with the lighting in town as it's changing, the rules in Oregon and things that we have there as we change out to LEDs, is some things like being able to dim lights or turn every other one off and these type of things, and hooking it to the network. We do use it for our water pump stations and sewer pump stations. We ran them out there to monitor it so we don't get overflowage and sewage. Stuff that we are able to do, and security cameras on those things and passing back high def stuff. So I know that's longer than I took, but there's a bunch of things we're doing with that.
In Fort Collins, we have 4 utilities, and basically that they'll all benefit from having this infrastructure. Ask about the backhaul. Platte River Power Authority, which is our generation transmission operator, owned by the 4 municipalities, including Fort Collins, who are half the energy content there. 20 years ago established a fiber ring, and that's now an asset of Fort Collins as a part of our broadband utility. And so all these things are starting to fall in place in terms of we're aligning with our institutional partners, healthcare being a primary partner, and there's new healthcare providers in our community, and they're some of our most strongest supporters because of telemedicine in the community, and they provide a lot of the great examples why you need to have symmetric gigabit infrastructure. And so for me, in our community, this is a game changer where it enables services and in ways that isn't provided now. And so and that's why it's so critical, I think, for municipalities to actually be able to enable these services and provide this infrastructure within our community. As Fort Collins, in terms of analogy for me is we provide the roads, but we don't place the stores along the roads. We enable the commerce to happen. So that same philosophy is playing out for us, where we're not a content provider, we're not bundling, but we're providing the access to, and the way the industry is changing. And I see it within my own family, where it's very little of the bundled cable provider that is what is utilized. It's just the access to the internet.
So I'm going to jump in with one last quick question. though we could talk about this question for an hour. So, but what are the ways that the current FCC and the legislative branch could support the efforts of local communities who are trying to get their citizens and businesses connected? If you have a suggestion for that, I'd love to hear it, and then we're going to wrap on that question, okay? So that
Federal loan guarantees for broadband project. Federal loan guarantees.
Requiring regional broadband planning, so similar to the 1962 federal aid. Highway Act created municipal planning organizations, create a mandated regional broadband planning agencies.
I think being able to, like Robert said, the loan program, by getting rid of some of the red tape. We tried to do that years ago with a grant from with the feds, the RUS, and there's so much red tape, and it ended up costing us more than it was worth. And with small communities, you know, you got the city manager also playing the janitor role, or the finance, but you know, we don't have staff and teams of lawyers to be able to go through some of the processes for that. So to piggyback onto what Robert said there, and maybe another BTOP stimulus program for getting backhaul out to like a road project and treat it more like a utility.
I think if they could also help support cooperatives, and you know, you get small communities trying to make large decisions. Sometimes it gets a little scary, not knowing exactly if is the cooperative telling us everything we need to know in order to enter into millions of dollars of contracts. And I think in our whole thing, I think went just fine. But I can see that people would not want to. Well, the biggest thing that our public had a problem with is funding. Using municipal dollars to help fund private business and having them be in charge of that. So it's basically giving them money to do their thing. I think that needs to have a little support on the side of Big Brother, shall we say, to help the smaller communities understand that it probably isn't a bad thing to do, but it needs to be done in a certain fashion that makes sense for everybody involved.
I would say municipal bonding. That's critical to development of infrastructure within cities and towns.
Thanks, and I will add a couple of my own. One is include local voices on committees like the BDAC, and allow gentlemen like this and some of our women mayors as well, but bringing in local voices that can help to inform what's actually happening on the ground. And I would say remove barriers to local choice, like the state level laws that impact the capacity of local leaders to actually manage their own local issues. And two others that I will mention are Dig Once and One Touch Make Ready or Climb Once. Those are both fairly standard and helpful at the local level for new entrants in order to encourage investment. And so I would love to see some of those happen as well. And so I would love to ask you to just take a moment, thank these gentlemen from all over the country who came today to share their wisdom. Oh, and of course, communities can join Next Century Cities too.
That's right. Well, we found that so valuable. I mean, I remember I think it was like 3 years ago when that was an important part of our deliberative process.
Well, thank you. I was on your expert committee.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.